Nobody knows or will tell us how many racing greyhounds are injured and or put down each year. That includes the sport's governing body, the Greyhound Board of Great Britain, whose spokesman is Simon Banks.
Well, many are rehomed by the retired Greyhound Trust, rehomes up to 3,500 dogs a year, and many are taken by other charities, other rehoming groups. There's also many owners take the dogs back to go and sleep on their sofas, as I've done with mine.
Can you say how many that doesn't happen to? How many are put down, for example?
No, we don't disclose euthanasia rates because there's different reasons for those. However, we do share those figures with greyhound welfare, animal welfare groups.
So you have got the figures for dogs that are euthanized in the course of racing through injury. You say you let the welfare charities know, but you don't want to make that public. But beyond that, when a dog has simply finished racing, what happens to them?
We know what happens when they leave our jurisdiction, if you like. You know, that's because we've got a paper trail and we know where they go. And if there are then concerns about what happens, we can follow that up. But it's perfectly true. We don't know if a dog retires at the age of 4, if it's put down, it has an accident or it's injured or it dies of natural causes. We do not know that information.
When we asked to look round at trainers' kennels, the GBGB took us to the impressive premises of Martin Wiley at Wickford. Some of the dogs have a whole field to themselves and they all look very, very happy and they're jumping up at the fencing and so on. But you get the feeling this is the gold standard of kennels. They're not all like this, are they?
No, unfortunately not. They're not all like this. And, you know, if you compare it to other industries, you get main dealers in cars and you get backstreet mechanics, and it's the same in greyhound racing. You know, some of us are better than others.
A really interesting thing you said to me was that you're also a personal trainer, and when you see people socially, you just say, I'm a personal trainer.
It's to avoid hassle because there's so much bad press about a small minority of greyhound trainers that you get tired with the same press. And because I spend so much time explaining that there's good and bad in every industry, it's better just to avoid the question.
Here in Romford, the public face of greyhound racing presents a good night out, but MPs want the sport to be more open about what happens once the racing's over.
Stephen Chittenden there at Romford Dog Stadium. After 7 o'clock, we're going to hear from the League Against Cruel Sport as they put forward their perspective.
It's 7:26. Tomorrow, the government will review the welfare of dogs in the sport of greyhound racing. Love to hear from you this morning if you've any experience of this at all, if you're a regular goer to greyhound racing, if you're an owner of a dog, if you have any views. The sport's governing body, the Greyhound Board of Great Britain, has told 5 Live Breakfast they put the animals' welfare at the centre of the sport. But the League Against Cruel Sport says they cannot be trusted to regulate themselves. 5 Live's Stephen Chittenden has been meeting people involved in the sport at Romford Greyhound Stadium in Essex.
My name's Steve Bradshaw, I own greyhounds at Romford.
Jack Bennett, I own greyhounds at Crayford and Romford. I tell you what, my dogs get looked after better than any home pets ever. Honestly, they get looked at, they are good as gold. They get looked after 24/7, no problem at all. I can't understand why any of the animal rights people cause any problems at all.
You mentioned the animal rights people. What they ask is what happens to the greyhounds when their career is over.
Right, let's say I've got 2 greyhounds on my sofa. I've only had 2 ex-racers in my life. Both of them enjoy a comfortable life with me. They absolutely love their lives. They sit on the sofa all day, they get walked twice a day.
It's not like that for all of them, is what they say.
No, and you're totally right in that. And but in every sport of industry, with horse racing, there's bad people that everyone gets tainted with it, kind of thing. But I've got 2 of my dogs sat at home with my mother tonight, and they've got a life. The most important thing to me is always their welfare.
Exactly.
Well, in a statement, the Greyhound Board of Great Britain told us greyhound welfare is central to our ethos and we are happy to work with DEFRA in developing initiatives to improve welfare even further. Greyhound racing is a well-regulated sport that's popular with the general public and we believe the current model of regulation has been effective. Well, let's talk to Dr Tony Shepherd, Head of Policy and Research at the League Against Cruel Sports. Morning.
Good morning.
What's the big problem here?
Well, I mean, the biggest problem of all is that there's a complete lack of transparency. There is no independent regulation of the greyhound industry. They're not required to publish any statistics on the number of dogs who get injured during races, the number of dogs who are euthanized every year, or the conditions that the dogs spend most of their lives in at the trainers' kennels. It's just complete secrecy.
Right. I mean, they say there are all sorts of now regulations to monitor what they do, how they do it. There are vets, aren't there, at every greyhound track for every race?
For the licensed tracks, but again, no one ever gets to see the results of the vet reports. This is all kept secret. There's no obligation for them to publish any information. They have to record injuries that occur, but even the government doesn't have the right to demand to see those statistics. They can keep them completely undercover.
And I know we heard from people there who will talk about how incredibly well their dogs are cared for, but there has always been this concern, hasn't there, about when the dogs come to the end of their useful lives in terms of racing and what happens then.
Absolutely, and this is always going to be a concern. We have about 10,000 dogs surplus to requirements every year, either because they are no longer fit to race or they were never good enough to race. And that's a lot of dogs to be rehomed into caring, responsible homes.
What happens to them mostly?
Unfortunately, we don't know. A lot of the rescue charities, so there are dedicated greyhound rescue charities, they might rehome about half of those dogs. We simply don't know what happened to the rest of them because, again, the industry is not required to publish those details.
But you're not calling at this stage for a ban on greyhound racing?
No, at this stage we want to see independent regulation. We think that it's completely ludicrous that at the moment the body responsible for promoting the industry is also responsible for policing the industry. We think with independent regulation that involves animal welfare representation that a lot more of these details will come out and we'll have a much clearer picture of exactly what these greyhounds are going through.
Thank you, Dr. Tony Shepherd from the League Against Cruel Sport.